Hello and welcome to this edition on Career Pathway Exploration. My name is Jojo Dalwadi, and I'm currently a senior at North Penn High School. On this ongoing series, we will be talking with community members in a variety of careers about how they arrived at their respective careers and what advice they can offer students like yourselves on how to be successful no matter what career path they chose after high school. Joining me today is Mr. Angelo Adams, who is an engineer and a CEO of a company. Um, Mr. Adams, before we kind of get started with the interview, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I just one correct. I'm not necessarily a CEO, although
Oh,
although my my ambition is to one day become a CEO. So my name is Angelo Adams. I'm originally from the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. Um, I went to high school. I went to a residential high school called Scotland School for Veterans Children, which is since shut down. But prior to kind of my career getting kicked off, I went to the United States Military Academy at West Point, where I spent 4 years really studying engineering. I was a mechanical engineer major. From there, I went into the Army as a Signal Corps officer. So that's more like IT, on the IT side of being in the Army. Jumped out of airplanes with the 82nd Airborne Division, led about 120 soldiers in Iraq as part of OIF, and then served a year in Korea, and I got out of the Army after about 5 years. So that's sort of the short stint to how I got to be a professional. I got out of the Army, and then I went to business school at the University of Michigan. Go Blue! So if anybody's interested in University of Michigan, I can talk to you offline there. And in Michigan, I was an MBA student. I got my master's in business administration. So I switched from being sort of an engineer focus to more being very, very much a generalist, right? And learning about business and finance and marketing and research and things like that. And after I graduated out of Michigan, I came back to Pennsylvania, and I worked for Johnson and Johnson on the Johnson's Baby brand as a brand marketer for 2 years. Really doing a lot of analytical analysis around which products are doing well, which products we should be marketing. I launched the natural series for Johnson's Baby, and then after I did about 2 years there, and then I found sort of Otis Elevator, right? Otis is one of those industries where a lot of people don't know. Behind the scenes, there's people that make those elevators go up and down. So I've been at Otis for about the last 11 years. And I started as a service manager in charge of about 10 to 15 mechanics. And now I run the service center for North America for Otis. And I've got about 500 employees that indirectly or directly report to me somehow.
well, first off, thank you for your service. And
Thank you.
as a Michigan alumni, I'm sure last night was a very happy night for you, seeing Ohio State losing the championship.
It's I was telling my wife, I could never cheer for Ohio State, right?
Uh-huh.
But in some ways, I do want the Big Ten to be, sort of the conference of choice, right? And right now, the SEC has been a runner for way too long, and so there's a little bit of me that probably would have preferred Ohio State to have won.
Okay. All right. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your official job title and a little bit about what you do currently?
Yeah, so I'm the senior director for the Otis Service Center, which so basically we have about 500 employees in Connecticut. I've got about 130 or so that operate the call line, so we call it Otis line.
Mhm.
So when customers have questions about their elevator, they need service, they call Otis line, and one of my employees will pick up on the other end. Um, they also, if individuals get stuck in elevators, right? You push the button on the elevator and that button calls to my building, and somebody picks up the phone, and that's, somebody who services in our Otis line. I've got about another 150 or so that work out in our operations side. So our operations is, if you think about that, that's like an Amazon warehouse, right?
Mhm.
So we service elevator parts. We got to get those parts pushed out. We develop new products, and we have to send it out through our distribution centers. So all of those parts and everything come through our service center for the service side. And then probably the other half of the building is a combination of engineers in different functional areas. So we have mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, I have systems engineers, and then they fall within the mod team. So modernization is you take old elevators and you make them new. We have we have a service engineering department that has those levels of engineers, and those are the ones that support our day-to-day service. Our mechanics that are out there every day, kind of servicing the elevators. And so we have engineers that support those functions. And then
Okay.
we've also got a supply chain side of the house that's in our building. And then lastly, believe it or not, we have a small company called Unitech. It's a smaller company, but it's a lot of good margin. So we sell parts to our competitors. So for competitors that maintain Otis Elevator, we sell them parts through our Unitech company. And so that's sort of what I do. And I've been at it now for about 2 years. February 1st will be 2 years for me.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
When you were in high school, did you go through the I know our high school specifically has a North Monco Technical Career Center. Did you go through a technical career center, or did you remain at your high school, and did you take engineering classes there?
Yeah, so good question. So we had I would say back then, right? So we had what we call different shops. So I took like wood shop, we call
Mhm.
it carpentry shop and auto shop. So I took all of that throughout high school, not as a focus per se, but just to kind of like a seventh or eighth grade, we got a chance to explore those things just to see if they were, paths that we want to take in the future. I really stuck to the college prep path in my high school, and so I took your traditional, chemistry and physics, and so I wasn't on a technical side in the high school. I was more on the college prep. So, but we also had like an ROTC function, junior ROTC in high school,
Mhm.
and so that kind of helped to lead me into my path at West Point.
Okay, so when you first started at West Point, what about your experience at that college kind of made you cater into the pathway of the career you currently do?
Yeah, so I think West Point is a leadership institution, front and center, right? So um, the experience that you get as a West Point cadet is probably, as far as leadership development, I don't think there's any other sort of experience out there that's as similar. So it was a lot of, you start out, you learn how to be a follower, right? You're put into a squad, and you have other cadets, right, who are
Mhm.
in charge of you, and you have to learn how to listen to people who may only be 2 or 3 years older than you are. And then you get, sort of a small leadership role where you're a team leader in charge of like two cadets. And then, ultimately when you're a senior, you could be in charge of you could be a leader um, between like 30, other cadets, or it could be like, 4,000, which is our brigade commander. So I would say just the leadership in of itself has allowed me to be able to transition. So I started in the Army, so I knew nothing about business. So I went to business school, and then I went into sort of corporate America, right? And I think what it helped me to be was very entrepreneurial and being agile, right? So as a business in corporate America, as a business leader, you don't know what problems are going to come at you, right? So you have to be very agile and entrepreneurial in your thinking. And be prepared for the coronavirus, right? That happened to us in March, right?
Yeah.
Nobody ever knew, we didn't see that coming, and so we weren't as prepared. However, we were able to respond very quickly. West Point also taught me to be a problem solver, right? I think as an engineer, that's really the basis of what engineering is, right? Ultimately, you're a problem solver, and so being able to think through problems critically, I think, is important. And that can start, and that does start, when you're in seventh or eighth grade. And I remember back when I was taking physics and chemistry, and things just as basic as what are you trying to find, right? So
Mm.
you put what you're trying to find. The next thing you put is like what's given, and then you think through the thought process of how you would solve that, right? And so I think the basics of it starts when you're in seventh and eighth grade, and it goes up through high school. But when you get into the college level and beyond, and being a leader in corporate America, I think all of that, the practice that you put in and being in high school sort of culminates into real life experience when you get into the real world. So
And I think what's interesting about your specific path is, would you agree when I say you kind of went from, you mentioned corporate America, so that's more white collar, and you
Yep.
went from kind of white collar work to blue collar work. And would you say how, so you know how to be a lawyer you have to take the LSAT and the bar exam. To be
Yep.
a doctor you have to go through the residency program and take all those specific tests.
Yeah.
In your specific field, would you say there's any education or training requirements that are specific in what you do?
Yes, I think the MBA is one that really helped me to be able to transition across industries, right? So in the MBA, what I talked about earlier is you get a general feel for marketing, you get a sales, you build your finance acumen, you learn many schools where you do a lot of case studies, right? And so you look at real world problems, and back then we were looking at Netflix and and Apple, and how Apple sort of started out and they were number two to IBM, and how they transitioned to become sort of the front runner in the computer industry. So I think the MBA is, for me and many business leaders, is sort of that certificate or that diploma of choice that you need. And obviously getting into different MBA programs, you got to take, similar to the high school, you got to take the SAT, the ACT, right? We had to take the GMAT. I think nowadays you can take the GMAT or the GRE. But those are sort of the gates to getting into the MBA school, and then from there, I think it's really about people and networking, right? So Michigan's obviously has got a big school,
Right.
people in many different industries. So being a student there, I was able to sort of reach out and talk to individuals, sort of like what you're doing now, and just have some coffee chats on what was your career path? Would you recommend it? How could I be successful? And so I did that as a student at Michigan. And I think that helped me to really, outline my path for what I wanted to do going forward.
So when you went to so when you went through the undergraduate program, do you need a specific type of degree, or can you study, for example, biology and still do what you do?
Yeah, so at West Point, everybody's an engineer, right? So,
Okay.
West Point was the first engineering school in America, right? So much of what we do there is all engineering. So you could be a biology major, but you're going to take some engineering classes. You could be
Right.
an English major, but you're going to take engineering classes. And I think the benefit of that is, again, engineering is really about problem solving, right? And so whether you're a biology major or English major, there's going to be points in your life that you're going to have to solve problems, particularly when you go out into the military, right? So the baseline of what they do at West Point, or what the cadets do, is engineering, and then they layer on top the other things that you're interested in. So I was a mechanical engineer. So I did my first 2 years, which was very general and, sort of English, math, and just some general engineering. And then I got more specific into thermo, fluids, vibrations, as I got into my junior and senior year at West Point.
So when you finally graduated from West Point, and then you later moved on to Michigan, is that correct?
Yes, I graduated from West Point. I went into the Army for 5 years, and then I went to Michigan for my MBA.
So right after that, what when you finally got that engineering job, was there anything specific that really kind of surprised you, or anything you didn't really take into account?
So are you talking about before I went to business school?
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, for me, it's all about like the type of person you are, right? And engineers are you have to be very analytical.
Mm.
So for me, it was really, I had the ability to be analytical, but sort of my passion is really about people and people development, and really about like how do you become a team player and those sorts of things. So I knew I wanted to at some point switch from being a focus on engineering to being something a little bit more general, which is why I went the MBA route versus getting a master's in engineering. So yeah, so engineers tend to be analytical, really good problem solvers. Um, but probably one of the shortcomings of many engineers is that they rather spend 8 hours a day sort of thinking through problems, doing computer analysis, than, standing up and talking to people or briefing, right? So, depending upon, individuals that are watching this video, if the latter half of it sounds like you and you really want to be, just kind of punching numbers and making analysis and statistical references, then, probably engineering is sort of that right fit. But if you are more of, a people person and teamwork, and sort of that thirst for knowledge outside of your functional area, then probably something along the lines of a general management route is something that you would want to consider, because it gives you can start in the engineering, right, and get that the basis of critical thinking and problem solving, and then you can take that and then use your passion for people and developing talent, into being more of a general manager.
Is that something you'd say you most enjoy about being in the general management role? Something where you in a position where you can kind of just reach out to people, build a coalition, and kind of get things done?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, that's my passion. That's my fit. Right. So, when I talk to kids about sort of what they want to do going forward, right? Even when we talk about colleges, I say, hey, you know what? You don't have to go to a school because it's number one or it's number two, or, the rankings, right? Or, whether or not they have basketball or football. I encourage students to make sure the school fits you, right? Make sure that when you go to that school, you can see yourself blossoming, right, and developing, to be a better person at that school. So for me, it's more so like I'm much more of a team player. Developing talent is my expertise. That was something I've been grounded in from the beginning. And so, the general management route is definitely the route that I'm most passionate about.
And was that type of ideology something that you've just always had, or is that something you kind of acquired in high school, taking a certain class or participating in a certain club?
Yeah, no, so this whole idea of fit is something I learned about when I was sort of looking at different schools for my MBA, right? And it was, there's you got your top 20 schools, and they're all known for, the different things. Like some schools are marketing schools, some schools are finance schools, some schools are, very general in their approach. Some are case study based schools, some are more lecture based. Right. And so, one of my mentors said, hey, at the end of the day, you want to find a school that you can make the most impact. Right. And so it's important to visit the schools. It's important to talk to the students and then understand sort of the culture of the school and whether or not you're going to fit within that culture. And so I took that, and that's what I did, when I was applying to Michigan. And then now, as I kind of navigate corporate America, I take the same approach, right? Because sometimes as a military guy, as a West Pointer, right, I think I can do anything, right? And it's probably right. I can do pretty much anything for like a year or two, but then at some point it's like you're not putting in as much effort, right? So it's better to be able to say, you know what, I'm working long hours, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing. So that's why it's important for me to make sure I have the right fit.
And you mentioned that it's important to kind of reach out to the schools that you want to go to. And I want to tell the 10th and 12th graders that attend North Penn that our college is lucky, our high school is lucky enough to have a system where we have representatives from all colleges around the region, where they kind of come into a specific room, and then
Mhm.
they kind of have a conversation with kids interested in going into that college. And that information can be found on Naviance, and I'm sure they're still having it, albeit through a Zoom meeting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And my daughter, she just graduated from high school last year, so she was one of the COVID classes, right? So her graduation was originally scheduled for June, and then they moved it to August, thinking that we'd be done. But
Yeah.
no, so she still ended up graduating online. But one of the things that I saw in many schools, they had like if you go to the school websites, they have a way for you to sort of navigate the school and see sort of a 3D
Mm,
like walking tour of the
yeah,
different schools. And so we utilize that as a resource as well, as I was kind of, helping her through the college application process.
that's really helpful. And going back to your kind of career, knowing everything that you know now, is there anything specific that you'd tell your high school self that to kind of like do differently, or something that you wish you had done to kind of make your life easier?
My high school self. Um, I mean, I would think that I don't really have many regrets. I mean, you know, I've enjoyed my path, whether it's in the army or out of the army. I've got a pretty, you know, some pretty good friends. I think if I had to sort of, you know, take a time in my life where I would probably do something a little bit different, I would just say, you know, to my high school self, I would say, even when you're in times of, you know, sort of West Point and going through struggles, try to find opportunities to have fun, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all a learning experience, and you're going to be better at the end of the day. So you know, sometimes when I repress myself and I'm down in the dumps, you know, if I just took a step back and looked outside of that situation and just found a way to appreciate and maybe have fun in the process, and enjoy the moment, that's probably the feedback I would give my high school self.
Okay. And kind of back channeling back to something you said in as a part of like this the first question, when you said that if the elevator stops and something bad happens, that someone presses a button and that call comes straight to you. What are some I can't imagine is that an everyday challenge, or is that something that happens every once in a while? And if that is something that happens once in a while, what is an everyday challenge in your position?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, we have elevators that we get calls, we get probably, you know, a million calls or more a year, right? And so I would say there are challenges where we get calls, but it's not the same elevator every day, right? So, you know, we've got 200 and, you know, 60,000 elevators on service in North America. So you're going to get calls, and sometimes the calls are as simple as, "Hey, when is my state inspector coming by?" Right. And so that call will come in, or it'll be a call where it's like, "Hey, what new products are you selling?" And then some of the calls are, "Hey, I'm stuck in the elevator, send a mechanic to get me out." So those challenges are pretty consistent. I would say just an everyday challenge. I give you two. One, I'll give you the pandemic, right? So when we started out the pandemic, probably around February, March, many of my employees were in the building, right? We were in one facility. So quickly, you know, that call center I talked about of 120 people, we had to figure out how do we remotely, you know, how do we get them laptops? How do we get them remotely spun up? And oftentimes, you know, these individuals had, you know, internet challenges initially, right? Some didn't have internet, some had connection challenges, and so, you know, we had to work through those challenges. My office, my employees are also responsible for ensuring that we get the proper PPE, right, personal protection equipment to our mechanics, right. And so if you watch the news, you would have heard that, hey, we can't get, you know, N95 masks and, you know, gloves, and so everything was very difficult and challenging to get. So my supply chain team, we worked, you know, literally nights and weekends, and we were calling to China and other parts of the world, because Otis is a global company, on how do we, you know, how do we get those resources within North America, and how do we get them quickly, right? And then once we got them in, we had to figure out how do we get them out to our field personnel. And then the third thing, as far as the pandemic, right? In the midst of a pandemic, we had all of the social unrest and things that were happening within the communities, right? And so, you know, people wanted to really talk about that and figure out, you know, what could we do differently. And so we just made sure, one, we checked on people's health, right? Because I think that's important, not just your physical health, but your mental health. Uh,
Mhm.
and the second thing is, you know, we deployed a program within we utilized our ERG. So we have employee resource groups, right? So we used like Momentum as the African American employee resource group. And we use them as a way to sort of have conversations, right? Meaningful conversations amongst, you know, just the employees, right? And so we found that was something that helped us to solve some of those challenging problems that we saw. And then so away from COVID, right? I would say, no matter where you are, and, you know, sort of any position, if you're a people manager, right? That's
Mhm.
People are always a challenge because people are unpredictable, right? So when you're a leader of people, it's, you know, sometimes, you know, the greatest thing is when you have a rock star employee and you can promote that employee,
Mhm.
and, you know, you see that employee grow up through the organization. but there's often times where you have, sort of conversations on employees that are less stellar, right? And you have to figure out how do we embrace this employee, understand their best learning style, and make them successful within the company. So I would say that always the ongoing challenge, right, is people, and how do you make someone feel comfortable? How do you ensure you're having, the right dialogue, ensuring you have, constant communication, and then ultimately it's you have to show that you care not only about them, but they're also their professional development and the success, because their success is going to be your success and the company's success.
So I think a big thing to take away is from specifically from your position is the type of leadership style. I know there are multiple leadership styles. There's the very direct person, there's the very democratic person that kind of uplifts everybody, there's
Mhm.
the person who kind of enlists fear to kind of get the most out of their workers. But in your experience, what would you say is the most helpful leadership style in regards to in regards to a worker that isn't really living up to the expectations that you set for them?
Yeah, so me, I would describe my leadership style as a servant leader, right?
Mm,
So my job is to make the organization successful, right? And sometimes that means removing roadblocks that you might have from being, the best that you can be at your position, right? And some I might be aware of, some I may not be aware of. You also want to listen to individuals, right? Because not a, just because I'm the leader doesn't necessarily mean I have the best ideas, right?
mm.
In fact, if I'm the leader and I have the best ideas, then I probably, we're probably going to be limited at some point, right? So I want to make sure that I shop around ideas and share ideas and share the thought process, because if your team and the people that you're managing understands the path that you're going to go down, right, they can provide, the best solution. And ultimately the solution that they provide, if you enact, those, if you enact those remedies, you'll get more buy-in, right? So I think it's important that as a servant leader, you listen to your employees, you care about their well-being, and then you find a way to remove roadblocks. And I think that's how you'll be successful.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Adams, those are all the questions that I had for you, and you definitely answered more questions that viewers probably had at home. I
Okay.
want to thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time to offer career advice to the students of North Penn. And this is kind of where I give every interviewee, an opportunity to kind of give a last minute small sentiment or word of advice for all the viewers at home. So if you have any, the floor is yours.
All right. So, being a former West Point outreach officer, so an admissions officer for West Point, I would say the advice that I would give is, at this point in time, don't, cast a big net, right? Don't eliminate options, right? Cast a big net, see what your options are. And at some point, once you get accepted into your different programs, that's when you start to eliminate, right? So, I'll talk to kids often, and it's like, oh, I don't want to go to a military academy, and oh, I don't want to go to this state, and I don't want to live up north because it's cold. I don't want to live down south because it's hot, right? But the reality of it is that people change, right? Opinions change, and as you're growing from a junior in high school to a sophomore in college, right, your thought of where you want to go and your career path could change. And so you talk to many college students, they've changed their major, right? So if you're picking a school based on just major alone, there's probably a good chance that at some point you're going to change your major, and you may not be happy, right? So what I would say is cast a big net. It's not just the major, it's not just sort of the location, but actually get out to those schools, talk to the people, understand the culture, understand the character of the school, and make sure you're picking a school that fits you best.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
All
And
right.
for everybody at home, you can all watch all of our episodes of the Career Pathway Exploration Series on the North Penn Television YouTube channel at youtube.com/NPTV. I'm Jojo Dawadi, and thank you for watching with us today. And we'll see you next time on the Career Pathway Exploration Series. Thanks again.